The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild may have gotten perfect 10s and won more awards than I could list off, including Game of the Year, but it wasn't perfect, and it had a lot of fans complaining about very specific things, one of which being the replacement of traditional dungeons and temples with shrines and divine beasts. With that said, Nintendo has a set pattern, one that has actually worked really well for them lately. An example being moving from Skyward Sword to Breath of the Wild. You see, Nintendo actually listens very closely to fan feedback, and then applies that feedback to new games. You can find several interviews where they mention this and plenty of examples that prove it. Even if we go all the way back to the GameCube, we obviously have the move from the cartoon art style that most fans originally hated in The Wind Waker to the more realistic look of Twilight Princess, but many more examples can be found. In this case, with Skyward Sword, a lot of the major complaints were about it not having a traditional overworld, and with it being entirely motion controlled. Aonuma would go on to actually mention these complaints in interviews concerning Zelda Wii U, or as it's now known, Breath of the Wild. Fans mostly hated that the entire map of Hyrule was segmented to only 4 major regions: the Sky, the Lanayru region, the Faron region, and the Eldin region. Hyrule Field, or any field for that matter, was completely gone. You basically had only one way to enter each area, but later on in the game, you do get different checkpoints at where you can land. Despite this, a lot of fans would still complain that it felt too isolated, especially in a time where open-world games like Skyrim were becoming more and more popular. There were even a lot of Legend of Skyrim memes coming out at the time, and even games like Darksiders were being praised for doing an open-world Zelda game better than Nintendo. This would be the main reason that Nintendo would give Breath of the Wild such a large and truly open world to explore. They even made a huge deal about how you could enter any major location, such as Kakariko Village or Death Mountain, from almost any direction. You weren't stuck to a single narrow trail that leads in and out, like a lot of the past games. Moving on from past examples, a new example of fan feedback is that of the shrines and divine beasts. Yes, some were great, but all of them having the same aesthetic made them all feel just really repetitive. So if Nintendo continues to follow their pattern of fixing what fans disliked the most about the previous games, it would be likely that Nintendo would bring back traditional dungeons or temples. Even if they don't, it's not like they can reuse the same 120 shrines from the original, and the dozens that came with the DLC. If we travel to a new land outside of Hyrule, it wouldn't make sense for that land to have shrines or divine beasts, as they were very specific to the story of Hyrule and defeating Ganondorf. We are even told we have completed all of the shrines and given the hero's tunic as a reward for proving ourselves to be a hero, which is exactly what the shrines were set up to do, for the character Link to prove himself to be the hero. Nintendo has already confirmed that they will be reusing the same Hyrule from the original Breath of the Wild. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that we won't see any new land or areas. We could likely see a second world, similar to the Dark World, Lorule, or even the Twilight Realm. Now the question becomes, how would they put temples in Hyrule when in Breath of the Wild we didn't see any? Except for the destroyed Temple of Time, of course. Well, it's actually very simple. The exact same way that shrines and Sheikah Towers were literally hidden underground and rose above ground once activated, the same could happen with some of these new temples. An avalanche could happen on one of these snowy mountain tops, revealing an ice-themed temple. A Goron could bust a huge wall leading to a cave that was closed off. Or a statue or boulder is pushed out of the way to reveal a secret entrance, similar to how we reached the Fire Temple from Goron City in Ocarina of Time. It's also likely that we will finally be getting underwater exploration, as Breath of the Wild 2 is being made because Nintendo had too many ideas that were left out of the main game. A lot of these ideas and concepts we can see in the Creating a Champion book. A lot of the concepts did end up as DLC, but there were a lot of concepts that didn't, such as the motorcycle and many other things. Even with the first trailer for Breath of the Wild 2, we can see more concept art from this book finally being used. And since Breath of the Wild had underwater exploration missing, despite having lots of concept art on how it would work in-game, and we even have speculation for a divine beast that would have been underwater, found inside the Hateno Tech Lab, so it's likely that yes, we will finally be getting underwater exploration. So it could easily be that the Water Temple was hidden the same way it was in Twilight Princess or Ocarina of Time. We just couldn't access it because we couldn't get to it. Other temples could literally just rise up out of the ground, just as most of the shrines and towers did in Breath of the Wild. We even have the remnants of the Arbiter's grounds in the Gerudo Desert. Who's to say that the Gerudo can't excavate it and reclaim their long-lost spirit temple? It's also likely that one of the heroine statues could be moved or opened and lead to an entrance to another dungeon. And of course, we have my favorite spirit temple theory. Please comment below and let us know what topic you would like us to discuss in our next video. If we use an idea that you suggest, we will give you a shout out and credit you for bringing it to our attention. We also have 2 separate topics here on screen for you to vote for, so leave a comment below letting us know which video you would like to see next. Whichever gets the most votes will be our next video.